Hello, everybody. Welcome to our third episode. Also, happy holidays. We wanted to get this episode out sooner, so,
I mean, somebody's celebrating something somewhere. So, Happy New Year, everybody. For today's episode of DM in Law, we thought we would talk about something that comes up pretty often, classes. Which D&D class is the best in our own opinions? Which classes are the easiest to play for new time players? We thought we would bounce our ideas and opinions on the D&D classes off of each other and then let you, the audience, decide for yourselves which class is the best.
Yeah, I know we were just talking about this not too long ago, but I'll just say this for any potential would-be DMs in the audience here. You're going to have players come up to you, and let's say you're playing a game, and you have a player join a couple sessions in, or a player drops out, and you're trying to replace them. You're inadvertently always going to get a player who's going to say, like, what does your group need? And they're going to be like, do you need more healing? Do you need more damage? I feel like I want to speak for every DM, but I guess I can't, but I don't care. I'm going to anyways. Players, you don't have to do that. We'll make it work. That's our job. You just play and commit to whatever you want. Don't play a cleric if you're going to hate it. Even if the group does need more healing, we can give more potions. We can give NPCs. We can give scrolls. Like, we can make it work. It's like, just play what you're actually going to want to interact with and role play with, because it's this isn't like a MMO online thing where you need to necessarily fill a role. If your group's 4 bards or 4 rogues, like, that's cool. We'll make it work.
Yeah, totally agreed. I've had that exact question come up, especially with new campaigns where players are new. That's come up a couple of times. Same with any players jumping in the middle of a campaign. That has happened once or twice. And it's like you said, it's that same question of what does the party need? When really just pick a class, or even if you're not sure what class you'd like to play, talk to your DM about it, about what they think maybe you would enjoy playing. One of my players, huge animal lover, nature lover, tree hugger, all of that. I knew immediately off the bat she would want to play a druid. And she did. Plays a druid, but I did pitch to her that just in case maybe magic was too complex as a brand new player, I gave her the option of picking ranger. At the end of the day, she still picked druid. Entirely her choice, but we made sure it was, she knew enough about it that she can confidently play her druid. You don't need to play the druid if you think that's what the party needs. You don't need to play the paladin if you think that it's a bunch of squishy PCs and they need a tank. Don't think about what the party needs. You are the one playing this character. But I mean, to each their own, but we figured let's go through all of the classes, quick little shoot, and then just, what we love about them, what we hate about them, what we think will be interesting for new players, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. And sorry in advance, but this is going to be like a 1,000-yard view of these classes. So for any new players listening, we might throw out terms or rules or abilities, and it might sound like gibberish. Our apologies, but we want to get through, what is it, 12 classes, I think? Or it's 10 or 12, but it's
technically a lot. Okay, it's technically 12 if you're looking at Player's Handbook. But I will just say, my favorite class is not in the Player's Handbook, because for some reason they have it out against artificers. So
it's on my list, which is so funny because it's like the very last thing, and it's like not bolded, and it's like, yeah, it came out 5 years later, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. For some reason, Wizards of the Coast really has it out against artificers, and I take great offense at that. But whatever. But I guess if we're gonna go alphabetically, Barbarian.
Also, I wanted to preface before, this is going to be based on 2014 rules, since now both editions are kind of out. We'll probably redo this with 2024, but that's going to take some time to learn all the differences and the nitty gritty. So for anybody listening to this now, this is for the older edition, if you want to call it that.
Okay, so everything that I know about Barbarians, I know because of specifically one player in one of my main campaigns. So, Barbarians, personally, I really prefer Barbarians over Fighters. They're intended to be that type of class that gets right in the middle of combat. So it's right in there. It's a melee combat fighter. But what makes it so special is the extra perks that you get with raging, with reckless attack. It really does work with that whole high risk, high reward when it comes to fighting as a barbarian. They are meant to not only, hit hard, but, barbarians, they throw caution to the wind and they really do just go all in on that attack. Defense is not really something that is important for barbarians because that's the whole point of reckless, right? Like they don't care about the defensive nature of fighting. They just go all in. They lose everything to that rage, that emotion that wells up, that just allows them to lose control in a way and hit that much harder.
Yeah, no, I agree. Barbarian is, I think they're one of the more fun low level classes. I know a lot of people start at level 3, but I think if you are going to do like levels 1 through 3, it really gives the barbarian a chance to feel very powerful because they get access to some of their abilities at level 2 instead of having to wait for their main subclass at level 3. So things like reckless, which essentially reckless and I forget what they call the other one, but there's one that essentially lets them make 2 attacks very early on. They can hit with they can turn their bonus into an attack as well. So very early on with reckless and that ability, you can be cutting through goblins, orcs, gnolls. It's a lot of fun. If someone messages me and they're like, hey, I really need you to sit in on a game, and I have like an hour to prep a character, I make a barbarian. You can fade into the background if you don't feel strong socially. They're amazing in combat. You can purposely play them very dumb and aloof, and it just totally works for what a barbarian is. So they're probably one of my top picks for, like I said, low level play. I've never had a player play them high up, so I can't speak to that. But they do one thing really well, which is hurt things and take hits. So I think it probably scales pretty well.
And I will also say, like, yes, you can definitely play a dumb and aloof barbarian. That I feel like is one of the more stereotypical things of the class. But by all means, you can absolutely play a very emotionally weighted barbarian as well. This player of mine who does play a barbarian, whenever this character rages, it doesn't come from a place of anger. Like anger and rage is not they're not the main emotions that are used. A lot of it comes instead from deep sadness and incredibly deep rooted trauma. That's where a lot of their emotion comes from that charges this character's rage. So you can absolutely still be very heavy into roleplay, still have incredible character motivations while playing a barbarian.
Absolutely. So we'll move on to Bard. So Bard is, for me, at least for my DMing style, I'll sometimes struggle to maybe get that traditional 4 players plus a DM. So I'll generally have my own character on backup who can participate in combats, just to kind of keep the challenge rating of combats equal. And I generally lean towards a Bard. They don't get that much offensive magic. They get really cool abilities to buff and assist the party. They can be a lot of fun again at low level with spells like Sleep, which can kind of clear a room of lower level enemies like kobolds or, again, orcs. It's one of my favorite things to do is just open a door, cast Sleep, and you watch like 6 things drop. Doesn't scale well for the higher level, but if you like role-playing and you like doing a little bit of everything, bards are so much fun because they're able to take pretty much training in any skill, and they're one of the few classes that can really fill out the skill list with dots to get like higher proficiency in them. I mean, the Bard was my first 5th edition character, and I loved him, so maybe I'm biased, but I really like the Bard.
You actually might be biased because I don't know if this is a hot take or what. I don't particularly care for the Bard class, like, at all. Maybe because I don't play a lot of Bard characters, or the ones that I have made, I tend to multi-class them. Because like you said, they are very good for, you know, getting skill proficiencies. Jack of all trades is really good as a feature for lower level bards. But I see them as a lot of, like utility characters, which is fine. It's just not my particular favorite. That being said, there are a lot of really great bards in a lot of Dungeons and Dragons media. Whether you're looking at things like Critical Role, Dimension 20, any of those. There are a lot of bards that are very popular, and it is a popular class with many, many people within the hobby, Cody included, but I'm just not one of those. I will say, when you start getting into like the nitty-gritty of subclasses or archetypes or whatever you want to call them, they are incredibly diverse. So it doesn't matter if you are a poet, an artist, a dancer, a fighter, like there's an avenue for bards pretty much in any way, shape, or form. Like it doesn't have to be just I'm going to sing and seduce the dragon. Like there's other ways that you can be a bard, and I would love to explore that more when I feel the want and need to do so.
Totally fair. One thing I was going to mention about bards that thinking about afterwards that I like myself again personally, and I think it could be a little difficult for maybe a new player is bards are a very reactionary class. They get access to like cutting words and bardic inspiration, and those can be huge in combat. But they have to be utilized correctly. It's very easy for newer players to waste bardic inspirations, handing them out willy nilly, and then your player forgets they have it and they don't use it. And the same with like using cutting words, where you could stop a big attack from hitting one of your teammates, but the timing is so particular because it's worded in the player's handbook as you have to jump in before us as the DM let you know that the attack hit or failed. So I think if you have a bard in your group, you have to have that conversation, because it's very easy for us DMs to just be like, okay, I got 6 players to get through. Boom, hit, boom, miss, boom, hit. And then your bard's like, I was going to do something. And it's like, it can be a little tricky. I recommend any new DM to be nice to your bard. Don't punish them if you're quick on the draw with revealing hits or misses. At least that's how I play it, because I'm very quick trying to get everyone through combat as quick as I can. But otherwise, again, I love bard. I didn't know you didn't really like the bard, so that's interesting.
No, I've never been a fan, but who knows? Maybe one day.
You can start us off on cleric if you'd like when you're ready.
We've reached cleric. Okay. Clerics. The incredibly religious characters. So when it comes to like the stories behind how clerics join parties, they're usually acolytes or priests for their deity, and their devotion to their divine patron is what allows them to use the god's power mainly to heal. That's mostly what clerics are known for. I think it's really interesting when people use clerics as other things. I think most notably would probably be Laura Bailey's character of Jester Lavore from Critical Role Campaign 2, because she's technically a cleric, but she doesn't like to be identified as the cleric. Clerics stereotypically are healers. Jester was never really much of a healer. Sorry to Jester. But she had a lot of really cool abilities. They have channel divinity. They can turn undead so that, all the typical undead zombies and other things, they can immediately use their radiant magic to get rid of them, make them turn tail. But they can do other cool things depending on which domain of magic they choose to follow.
Yeah. Cleric is not one that I see many times at my table. I think Dungeons & Dragons has done a really good job of making healing type magic available to many classes. Therefore, you don't have to have a cleric. One thing I love about the cleric in Dungeons & Dragons in general, and I picked it up starting in, because I started in 3.5 edition, is clerics can wear really heavy armor, and it's not uncommon to have a cleric who can run up and hit things and tank damage, and they get a lot of protective magic to increase their armor class or their allies' armor class. And they're also, again, this is only matters if you're someone like me who plays from level 1 and doesn't just jump straight to level 3, but they get access to their domain at 2nd level, and there's a lot of cool domains. You can basically, in my opinion, it's almost like playing a cleric, but then getting to pick another class on the list and being like, I kind of want some of what they have. You can be like a cleric strong in nature magic, a cleric strong in necrotic or radiant or roguish abilities. There's a lot, and I think I really should give the cleric a bit more of a read, but it's not my general go-to. I'm drawn more towards a paladin when I've played any sort of healer, because which we'll get to in the list. But I would say, yeah, clerics, like, just because you pick a cleric doesn't mean you can't run up and have a sword and shield. Like, they can wear heavy armor. They can do some really cool stuff.
Oh, for sure.
So next up would be Druid, which is actually the first class I ever played. So if Bard's got a special place in my heart, Druid really does. Druids are just so cool. They can turn into animals. They get access to healing magic. They get nature magic. They, in my opinion, and this is something that I kind of sell to my players sometimes when they're torn between like Druid or something else. In my opinion, Druids are actually the best rogues or thieves in regards to sneaking. And the Dungeons and Dragons movie, actually, Honor Among Thieves did it perfectly. Yeah, a rogue can pick a lock and walk through a door. If I'm a druid, I can just turn into a mouse and go under the door, and no one's paying attention to the mouse. Like, it's so, you can be so creative with the druid, and I love that. It's like, think of an animal, and as long as your DM's generally on board, you can really be creative with how you get around solutions. And, I have my one player who plays a druid, and if he needs to do a climbing check, he turns into a monkey. If he needs to sneak, he turns into a mouse. It's such a fun class. So in early editions, you weren't able to have any metal. You had to have all wooden stuff. That was a big rule in 3rd edition. I don't think that's
still,
the case.
No, it still is.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I don't know about the 2024 edition, but I know for sure in 2014 when they did 5th edition, druids don't typically use any metal at all. If they have a shield, it's a wooden shield. They won't use swords. If anything, like, they're more likely to use a club or a quarterstaff, or if they do have a blade of some sort, it's usually a magical one like a flame blade that they've conjured up with their magic. But metal, nah, no metal. They don't like it. It's highly frowned upon, because it's too pure, and it's no longer of the earth if it's been like heavily refined.
Makes sense. Yeah. One more thing I wanted to add, because I always found this really funny, and then I want to hear what you think of the druid. They probably have fixed this, but I don't know for sure. At least in the 2014 version, a level 20 druid is essentially unkillable because of you get access to, it's called unlimited wild shaping, and everyone just turns into a giant crocodile, which has like 100 and something HP. And the way it works in the old version, and again, this might have been errata, but at least as it's written in the player's handbook, is when you are reduced to 0 hit points in your wild shape form, yes, any damage you take does spill over to your human form, but you essentially get this extra HP pool. So if you have 90 HP as a druid, you get 130 plus as a crocodile. Me as a DM, I have to burn through 130 hit points of damage to even start to hit your druid pool. And on your next turn, you just turn back into that giant crocodile and suddenly you have another 130 HP. It's crazy. It's so broken, but
it's incredibly broken. I actually just pulled out my player's handbook just to make sure that I was looking at this correctly. But yes, you are correct. At level 20, if you remain druid all throughout 20 levels, at level 20 you become an archdruid, so you can wild shape an unlimited number of times. So, giant crocodile, drop to 0 as the beast form. Cool, you're back up as a giant crocodile as many times as you'd like. But an interesting thing to point out as well, at level 18, druids have timeless body, so they slow down their aging. So for every 10 years as druid, your body only ages 1 year. Ignore the fact that you can just continuously wild shape over and over. Your body, like, you as a druid, you'll live almost forever in comparison to all of your other party members or NPCs or whatever else. Like, you're essentially as close to immortality as possible without diving into, like, dark magic. The thing I like about druid as well, even if you discount any of the wild shaping stuff, just the selection of spells that comes with this class, it's insane, because you could go from, you've got so many different magical circles to choose from. It easily has more than I think any other class, because Circle of the Land alone is insane, because you have all of these different areas, whether it's the coast, the ocean, the forest, the desert, like, so much choice, which I find can be a little bit overwhelming. But overall, I love druids. Don't knock them till you try them.
And I think speaking of magic, any like, again, with the focus of a new player, any magical class in D&D is a little much because of how bizarre the magic rules and the way spell slots work are. It's my biggest point of contention is, I'm level 5, why can't I cast level 5 magic? I'm like, it's not how it works.
Yeah,
So no. Yeah.
the spells, the spell levels and the class levels, not the same thing. Very, very different. And I understand it's a bit of a difficult concept to grasp as a new player, because why are you telling a player that their character can go up to level 20, but their spell level only goes up to 9?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that doesn't make sense. Not really. But fighter, I don't love fighters, but I do recognize it is a very easy class to get into for anybody who really just wants to hack and slash. And for a lot of new people who don't care for magic, fighter is a really good entry point into building a character with Dungeons and Dragons. It is really cool, at least if you really like melee style characters and you like weapons and you like different maneuvers. It's a really good class for those combat heavy campaigns, just because there's so much that you can do, so much versatility in combat as a fighter, regardless of which archetype you choose. There's so much. I really love Second Wind is a really good thing that comes with being a fighter. You get that early level as well. I think you get that in level 2, if I'm remembering it
Yeah,
correctly.
action surge is huge. Most people multi-class like what, 2 levels into fighter just to get action surge.
Usually, yeah. I think that might actually be what my Barbarian did. Yeah, I'm pretty sure when she multiclassed, she went from Barbarian, took a couple levels in Fighter before then adding a level of Paladin. But Fighter, very interesting. The thing that I do like is as they've added more and more archetypes, like, keep in mind this one is in the main player's handbook from 2014. Some people might want a little bit of magic without having to multi-class, so I do like that they added the Eldritch Knight archetype.
Yes.
Because it is a very popular one, but it also, it doesn't overcomplicate magic. Whereas if you had multi-classed with, like, Wizard or Sorcerer, it is a very interesting thing. And I really like the maneuvers. Like, there's a lot of choice with maneuvers. It makes fighting a lot more interesting and a lot more unique to the character. So you can, you've got a couple of, like, set maneuvers that maybe your battle master fighter has. They might have some moves that set their fighting style apart while still keeping combat interesting, because truthfully, I get bored during combat. And if it's the same thing turn after turn, I'm just like, I'm gonna mentally check out.
Yeah. That's where fighters, I think, struggle, is that there's some cool subclasses, but aside from really the one that allows you to do maneuvers, which are awesome, superiority die, all that, and Eldritch Knight, like, I'm weird because I really like champion, but not because I like the fighter. Again, I agree with everything you said. Fighters are the vanilla. Your cousin comes over and you got 10 minutes to prep, and you're like, "You're a fighter, dude. We'll figure this out." But one thing I love that they get access to, again, this is multi-classing, and this is, I guess, maybe higher tier play, but it's something that I've always enjoyed doing. Is you're a barbarian. You're like, awesome. I get reckless attack. I can give myself advantage all the time. I'm hitting stuff. You take 3 levels of fighter and you take champion. You now crit on a 19 and a 20. And when you have advantage, having a 10% chance to crit, it's actually impressive how often you can force crits to happen. So again, for essentially being level 6 or even less, actually, you could technically be second level 5. You could be 2 levels in barbarian, 3 in fighter, and now suddenly you get 2 attacks a turn, because you can, again, I forget what it's called, but barbarians can turn their bonus into like an offhand attack. Reckless, so you have advantage. You're rolling twice. You have a 10% chance to crit every time you roll, and you're usually using an axe with like a d12 of damage. Like, you can nuke bosses at low level doing this, and it can be fun to do that, but there's not much else you can do. It's just, I've always loved champion and being able to manipulate the crits.
Damn, that sounds like such a min-maxer thing to do.
Oh, I have a friend who's a min-maxer, and I'm terrible compared to him. He is the one of these days I'll have to see if I can get him on, because he is so good at finding these broken builds, and the things he can make his characters do just blow my mind. I'd never even think that it could happen.
I used to be a little bit of a min-maxer, but now I'm like, nah, do it for the plot. My past self, if I had made, you know, my artificer sorcerer the way that I have, past me would be like, what the heck did you do? I gave my artificer sorcerer multi-class build, I gave her a +0 constitution. She does magic, and I gave her a +0 constitution.
I mean, you need a dump stat somewhere.
But it makes sense. She's done nothing but worked in a shop her whole life. She just tweaks things for a living. Like, you're telling me that she's got a strong constitution and concentration? No.
I've always wanted to do the same. I mean, after watching the second season of Arcane, if I did get the chance in the near future to play, I think I'd really want to do a magic caster, but play like a Victor style character. Like really feeble, really like thing, but having access to really powerful magic. I think that'd be a fun play style. You know, can't jump a chasm to save my life, but I would just really get the creative juices flowing on how I'm gonna get around these self-imposed handicaps.
I think that would be fun.
Monk's our next option, so I'll let you start with this because I don't have a lot of exposure to Monk, I'll be honest.
Okay, yeah, honestly, I actually really like monks. First exposure to those was Beauregard Lionette, Marisha Ray's character from Campaign 2 of Critical Role. I think she probably brought a lot of exposure to the class because I think most people, they didn't pay as much attention to monk before as they do now. Very, very cool. I think they're an incredibly well-rounded class. Key points are one of my favorite things when you have monks. When you get your key points and you have all of these extra things that you can do as your bonus actions, super cool. You're telling me that as a bonus action, you can do the dodge action, you can do like a dash action, you can do an extra attack, like all of these things that you can do, you know, patient defense, step of the wind. These are so many amazing things that you can do, and it's built right into the class. You don't have to have a chosen subclass to do these things. Like, this just comes with it. You also have deflect missiles. If somebody shoots a bolt or an arrow at you, you can roll to catch it. Like, that's super badass. At a certain point, you stop taking fall damage, or I think it's slow fall. If you fall from like any height, you either take half damage or no damage at all. You can run on, I think at some point you can run on walls. You are fast as heck. There's so much, and you're strong too. At a certain point, your punches do magical damage. You could punch ghosts and it'll be fine.
No, absolutely, yeah. For me, I mean, I've had players who are monks, don't get me wrong, and they are super, in my opinion, at least as a DM, super broken. Like you said, step of the wind, they can move, dash, and step of the wind. I have literally seen a player once, like, cross an entire dungeon in one round of combat. I'm talking 200 plus feet of movement. Because they were a tabaxi, so they got extra movement, and it was just all this stuff. And it's like, this dude just moved like 200 plus feet in one turn.
Mm-hmm.
Fury of blows. They can attack multiple times. Like you said, they count as magical. They don't need a weapon, so being disarmed or anything doesn't bother them. Their armor class doesn't rely on actually having armor, so monsters like rust monsters or disarming your opponents to make a combat harder. Monks don't care. They just are still good. And Stunning Strike is super annoying because your player will just shut down your big bad over and over again.
Yeah, and all that. And that's before any of the subclass stuff.
I don't even know their subclasses. We're just talking about base monk stuff, but and that's so good just as they are. And then they get extra stuff, which is just insane.
Yeah, I think when you get to be a high enough level monk, if they are under some certain condition where they are not like mentally present, they can pull themselves into like a meditative state, and they can break the concentration on whatever is like holding them in that phase, whether they are like stunned or paralyzed or whatever else. Like, they have the mental acuity to be able to like break through anything, any sort of like mental load holding them down, which is wild. I think even, I don't know if I'm making this up. I don't think it's in the main player's handbook. It might be in like an auxiliary source book, but I think there's a subclass. It might be Way of Mercy, but like there's a way that monks can heal using their fists.
I wouldn't put it past them. They have, I know there's like the Way of 4 Elements, I think, and then there's a Way of Shadow, which again...
So essentially, Avatar: The Last Airbender and ninjas.
Yeah, and it's like, it essentially just lets their key points do even more crazy stuff. You want to spend key points and cast spells, do it. You want to spend key points and teleport, like it's just crazy.
I think it can definitely be very broken as a class, specifically for monks, just with how much stuff they have. I don't think I've really realized until saying it out loud just how much monks really have before even delving into their subclasses. It's just a
Yeah,
lot.
we literally haven't talked about their subclasses at all. We'll move on to Paladin in a sec, but there's one other thing I wanted to add. This was just a perspective of a new player, my coworker who, my wife plays a monk, and the new player, we were talking at work, and he goes, "How do I do all the things that your wife does in D&D?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, in her turn, she does like 9 things, and then when it's my turn, you let me cast a spell and move, and that's it." And trying to explain key points to him and how that works. But in his mind, it's just like, I want to be able to do 7 things in one turn. And it was just such an innocent, like, thought of like, he's just watching this player go off, and then he's just like, my turn's done.
Yeah, it's a little disheartening almost because just like the difference in, you know, in how much you can do per turn. Like, oh my god, when we were playing that one session and she did all of these things, and literally the rest of us are like, action, bonus action, movement, done.
Yep.
Action, bonus action, movement, done. And then before you knew it, it's her turn again, and she's just like, bam, 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 bam. Oh, wait, forgot this. Bam, 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 bam.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Yep. It's one I'm gonna have to try one of these days. 100%. Maybe with the new 2024, we'll find some reason to make a game going, and I'll play a monk. Well, maybe we should just make a game where we're forced to play classes we've never played before.
No, or to make it super fun, we just have a whole one shot of oops, all monks.
Fair. All right. Next up is Paladin. Now, Paladin, again, is another one where, again, I have a playstyle where a lot of times I will have a character on standby in case a player can't make it to keep the party level and at least making sure there's at least 4 players for combat balance and whatnot. So I actually made an NPC Paladin who went from level 1 all the way to level 20 as we did the early books, The Horde of the Dragon Queen, The Rise of Tiamat. So it was really cool. Even though I was DMing, I still got to experience playing a character that made it all the way to level 20. I mean, if a player comes up to me and says, I want to be a fighter, I'm like, be a Paladin. Paladins are just awesome. I mean, again, very early level. They're insanely powerful. They're another class that gets access to things at level 2. They get the ability to heal. It doesn't burn spell slots, which is really good for even high. It never loses usefulness because as you play D&D for a while and you realize that your characters are just as good at 1 HP as they are at 1,000, Lay of Hands just becomes like a clear, you have 1 HP again, get up, get back in this fight. So instead of burning your 30 healing points on healing someone fully, you can just be like, here's 1 HP, here's 1 HP, here's 1 HP. And it works really well. Paladins are another one that they get some really good subclasses. Kind of feel like, because I have a player right now that's playing a Paladin, they have some really amazing subclasses and they have some terrible ones. But yeah, I mean, Paladins are cool. I love them. They've kind of moved away from the whole, if you go against your god, you get stripped of powers. You can even play evil paladins to do necrotic instead of healing. You can hurt people. I just love them, so I don't have a whole lot to add other than if you want to be a fighter, be a paladin instead. But have you had paladin players?
The only exposure to paladin that I've had in game would be the player who went barbarian fighter paladin. Like, and we play a little bit more role play heavy. It's all about the story and the plot. So like the reason that they went paladin, it made perfect sense. At the moment, I think she only has 1 level of paladin, if I'm remembering correctly. So right now she doesn't have a lot of the benefits, but she'll continue to get more and more of those benefits. What I do like about paladin is it kind of wraps up fighter with cleric in a really, really good way. Because paladins very much like clerics, they both have channel divinity. So they'll be able to do that, turn undead, but also get extra divine powers with that as well, depending on which oath or subclass they've chosen for level 3. But for the people who really like fighting and really like combat, Divine Smite is going to be your best friend. You don't actually need spell slots for magic. You need spell slots for your Divine Smites.
Yeah. And old Divine Smite was broken. Again, I'm going off of what's written in the player's handbook that I own. The way it used to work is that after making a successful attack, you can then decide whether or not you want to burn a spell slot to Divine Smite, which means there was never a reason not to do it because you know for sure that you hit your target, which means you could be like, if you whiffed that turn, you weren't wasting a resource that you didn't mean to. I believe that has been fixed. I could be wrong. I'm sure in the 2024 it's been fixed. I don't know if they ever fixed it in 2014, but I'll never forget it being worded that way. On a successful attack, you can Divine Smite.
I feel like it's still the same for 2014. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, when you hit a creature with a melee weapon attack, you can expend 1 spell slot to deal radiant damage to the target, in addition to the weapon's damage.
Yeah, and 2d8 at low level is so strong. And then the fact that it just scales even higher, like, it's insane.
Yeah, and I think, and it does an extra 1d8 if the target is undead or a fiend.
Yeah,
so
it's such a good. It never loses its oomph. And at low level, again, it's like the Barbarian. A Divine Smite can kill your CR2 big boss in like one hit. You're hitting with a longsword, which does like 1d10. You burn a thing. Now you're doing 1d10 plus 2d8 plus whatever their modifier, which could be like plus 3. And heaven forbid they crit and all those dice get doubled. It's just insane.
Yeah. That's where, again, the min-maxers, they love that build.
I mean, Paladin's fun. Like I said, I did level 1. That's the only character I've ever done level 1 to 20. So again, it kind of has a special place in my heart for that reason. And being able to see it actually work at every level was really cool. And it never... I mean, we were at level 20 fighting Tiamat, and my NPC was like standing in front of the Queen of Dragons tanking hits. It was just crazy. And he was taking like 100 plus damage around, and he's like, I don't care. Whatever.
No. Paladins, great. Love them. Highly recommend. 10 out of 10.
But now we're on to our sweet summer child. This is the... Oh, it's so sad because I think we all feel the same way, but Ranger.
Oh,
sweet. You can start with Ranger.
Sweet baby Ranger. Okay, Ranger was the very first class that I ever played. I don't even know what drew me to Ranger, but
Everyone plays a Ranger. I've played a Ranger.
Yeah, I know. But when you look at it, literally every class could do it better.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter which aspect. You want the nature magic? Druids can do it better. Nature clerics can do it better. You could be a beastmaster and have an animal companion, but guess what? Talk to your DM and have a good conversation with them. Literally any character can have an animal companion.
Well, and I think in later things like Tasha's and stuff, they made it where druids can have it. And they also changed how they've changed how animal companions work like 5 times for the Ranger, let's be honest.
Yeah. Shout out to the Circle of Wildfire Druids. Those are badass. Honestly, I had to reread Ranger just to see like what sets it apart from other classes. I think the only thing the only thing is like they're decent at tracking enemies and foes. 2014 Ranger is not so kind because it's like your features are, favored enemy, natural explorer, fighting style, spellcasting. It's basic. It's incredibly basic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think everybody hears Ranger and they think, yes, Aragorn, Strider, Lord of the Rings. And that's about as far as it goes.
Let me ask you something about your Ranger, because I feel like every player does this. Did you subclass into Rogue?
Yeah.
Every Ranger does it. And that's the problem, is to make your Ranger good, you are abusing the other abilities of other classes, and everyone does the same thing, which is, I want to sneak attack, but I want to sneak attack from 200 feet away.
Yeah.
And be really, really good at it. And that's what every Ranger does.
Yeah. Because you get Ranger at least once, that way you can get Hunter's Mark. That's which is not even that good.
Useless, but it's like, well, it's an extra dice to roll. Because I played a Ranger and I min-maxed the crap out of him. And I took all the most broken stuff. I took like steady aim, sharpshooter, and I could do like 80 points of damage. But I had nothing else. I was a Nova round first turn, and then I did like 13 damage every other turn after that.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I love my first character. I will love him forever, but I will never ever revisit him. I don't think.
Unfortunately, Ranger needs to just be a subclass of fighter, I think. I think they just need to let it go and move some of its abilities to other classes.
I'm just saying, if they really want to keep fit to 12 classes in the player's handbook. Artificer is right there.
It could be a good ad. I think you're right.
Just I'm sorry, Ranger, but give Ranger the boat and then stick Artificer in there. Problem solved.
Yeah. I love Ranger. I've played a Ranger. I don't know why so many players are drawn to him. Again, it's something about the pictures, I think, where they always show a Ranger with like a wolf, and everyone's like, I want to command a wolf. That's so cool. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
at high level play, your wolf's going to get one shot every turn, and your Ranger's going to get outdamaged by pretty much any other class at higher level.
I'm curious, when you played a Ranger, did you play a Beastmaster Ranger?
Of course. Yes.
See, I didn't. I didn't go Beastmaster. I went Hunter.
Interesting. Okay.
Because Hunter is more interesting just because like when it comes to picking features, there are certain things that I really liked. There was Horde Breaker, where essentially I was able to hit one target, and then if there was any other targets within 5 feet of that initial one, I could use another action to essentially fire at something else, and I could kind of just keep going. I remember for like defensive tactics, I think it might have had, I don't remember what I picked at level 7, but I know at like level 11, I chose this one particular feature. It was volley. So I could like use my action to make a range attack against like a larger number of creatures all at once. Depending on the subclass, it's not terrible. It's just in comparison to everybody else in the party, it's a little sad.
Yeah, because I mean, like you
It's not
said, you're
even a
talking
little
about
sad.
levels.
It's
You're
a
talking about
lot
level
sad.
7, where a lot of classes are getting access to 2 attacks, or haste magic, where they can now do way more.
I mean, Ranger has extra attack. Like that was a level 5 thing.
Yeah, but I just mean that, it's like this special ability lets me hurt creatures if they happen to be adjacent and stuff. But it's like you're getting to levels where your magic casters can cast fireball and just nuke a whole horde anyway.
Yeah, like it definitely seemed like Rangers were built to be a lot more utility because like they could track things across really great distances. They knew terrain really well without dying. Like this is relying on a lot of DMs to be using survival checks and like exploring the wilderness. If your campaign is set in the city, I don't think your ranger is going to be much use.
Exactly. It's a lot of. I think Ranger makes the DM have to do a lot of work to make the Ranger useful, which is not how you want to do it. But again, you're speaking to 2 DMs who both played Ranger. Something draws people to Ranger. I don't know what it is. It's probably like you said, growing up with Lord of the Rings and wanting to be that badass archer. But yeah, it needs to go.
It's interesting because players are drawn to Rangers, but DMs are like, get that away from me.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of what everyone multi-class on too, next up is Rogue. Rogues are good, but I think they're good at low level mostly only. Maybe that's a hot take, but my wife plays rogues quite often, and even she has said like, yeah, levels 1 through 5 they're fun, but then they do the same thing over and over again, and they're very good at those few things: traps, lock picking, sneak attack to do a crap ton of damage. But once the other classes start to catch up and get some of their other abilities, they just become kind of become a ranger, which I think is why those 2 classes kind of bleed into each other so much,
Yeah.
to try to keep the damage scaling as comparable as possible.
Yeah, and I feel like it's definitely a good class for new players because it's fun after a certain point. Like not a lot of people are going to go levels 1 through 20, but levels 1 through 10, absolutely. Like the first 10 levels of Rogue I think are pretty good for scaling. There's a lot that you can do, there's a lot of utility, there's a lot of action economy in combat. So like
Yeah. Cunning
Rogues,
action is huge. Like that's again a multi-classic staple. Like people will put 2 levels into Rogue to just take that one ability because it's so good.
oh yeah, there's a lot. Like sneak attack is fantastic. Most people want Rogue just for that. Uncanny dodge is really good to have. Evasion. So like the whole point of the Rogue is to be sneaky and slippery. Like
It does
it's
it
not
well. It does do it. I give it
yeah,
100% credit for that. It does
yeah.
do it.
What it does incredibly well. So yep. I will say it's also got some similarities to Bard in the first 2 levels, just because where Bard does jack of all trades, Rogue does
Expertise. Right?
expertise. Yes. So like even though you don't do everything, you can pick a couple of things that you're already good at and you double your proficiency bonus on that.
Yeah, low level, that's huge.
Yeah.
You will almost never fail the checks that you want to succeed at. Like stealth, you can make rogues invisible, essentially.
Yeah. So that's why like bards are great because you can buff up all of your skills in that sense. And then rogues are like, cool, you're good at these things. Well, now you're extra good at these things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not uncommon for rogues to have. I mean, I think the theoretical max is a +8 at level 1. So rogues are. It's not uncommon for a rogue to be like, I roll a stealth check, I get +8 to this at level 1. And then all the
Yeah.
other players are like, I have a +2 in this.
Yeah. Or worse, I have a -1.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Rogues are good, but I feel like they kind of at higher levels start to go the way of the fighter, and even though like I think the Barbarian does it a little bit better, where it feels relevant all the way to 20, and that's just player feedback. I've never played a rogue because they always show up in all my games. I've gotten a lot of exposure, but after about level 5, I find players. Which you can always multi-class. That's always an option too. But if you were to play a pure rogue, people seem to start to get a little fatigued at being only good at like 5 things. So next up would be sorcerer. I'll let you start sorcerer.
Okay, so maybe because I'm still playing like early level sorcerer, I like sorcerer a fair amount. It's not my favorite class, but I like that the magic is innate, it's not learned. So a lot of people are kind of unsure about the difference between a sorcerer and a wizard. Sorcerer, the magic comes innately from within, or is like something, maybe like some sort of cataclysmic or like event happened that ingrained magic within you, versus wizard who goes to school and learns magic and doesn't have a magical bone in their body unless they're taught. But sorcerers, I think they're really well known for wild magic as their one specific subclass, but they have a lot of other ones. Personally, though, I really like the sorcery points. It is something that sets the class apart because they can do really interesting things with their magic. You can really play around with, D&D's rules surrounding magic. You can do things like, if you choose this particular meta magic, you can do subtle spell. So in a really role play heavy campaign where maybe things like speaking incantations or actually, doing some sort of movement like somatic component is important. You can do subtle spell so that nobody actually knows that you are casting a spell at all. You can do, twinned spell. You have a spell that maybe does damage to one target. Guess what? You can use a sorcery point or several, however many it is, and you can have that spell split and hit 2 targets. Like, you can really play around with the rules of magic. You can quicken a spell, so if you have something that takes a whole action, you can cast something as a bonus action and then use another cantrip outside of that. Like, sorcerer in combat has a lot of action economy because of the sorcery points.
Yeah.
It makes them a little more combat heavy.
They're similar in regards to the monk in that everything I love about the sorcerer is just innate to them. It has nothing to do with their subclasses, which is just the cherry on top. I've had a few players who've played sorcerer at a pretty high level, and for a newbie, if you want to play magic, I think sorcerer is amazing. The main reason why is sorcerers, when they pick their spells, they lock them in until they level up. So I think it can be really beneficial to tell a new player, here's a list of 6 spells. This is the magic you know. But when you get into wizard and druid and cleric, which technically can change their magic every long rest, it can get real messy and really drag things down. So I think sorcerer, in my opinion, is probably the ultimate, like, I'm a newbie, I want to learn magic. It's like perfect. Sorcery points, amazing. The one that I love the most when you talk about meta magic is there's one where you can make it so that your spell does not target your allies, which then makes the fireball spell huge, because now you can just throw fireballs into your group and be like, I don't target these 4 people, and you can just nuke enemies in close combat, which is just crazy.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. You know what? I think I was looking at that earlier today. I think it's called Careful Spell.
Yes, Careful Spell.
Which is awesome. It is
a
favorite. I think there's actually a wizard subclass that does something similar. It might be the evocation wizard, where like when your allies have to make a dexterity saving throw, you can choose to like keep them in a safe little pocket outside of your target area. So you can also, as a wizard, throw fireballs at your friends and they will be safe from it.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
sorcerer is still better, maybe.
Yeah,
in this one in particular instance.
Yeah. I mean, sorcerer's great.
There's a lot of cool subclasses. Highly recommend. Very fun class.
You really can't go wrong with the sorcerer. You'll have fun with it. All right, warlock. So here's the thing about warlock. I don't know a lot about them. I've had a few players play them. I like what they're trying to go for. I think the design of them is a little too restricting in the fact that they get access to a lot of magic, but they don't get access to a lot of magical charges or spell slots. But the idea is that they recharge their spells on a short rest, which I get the feeling, and I understand that the idea is that they can cast a lot of magic throughout the day. But I have a player right now, and she can cast 2 spells, and then somehow we have to justify the whole party needing to rest for her to recharge her 2 spells, which means you're essentially stuck doing the staple of a warlock, which is Eldritch Blast, which is cool, and I love the Eldritch invocations, which can be like passive abilities. And I know that there's broken warlock builds. I've definitely seen and heard of them, but I don't like the warlock, I'll be honest. I think they have great roleplay potential with the whole patron and having a demon or an angel or someone give you a power, and they can kind of come into your story as and really kind of shake things up. But I've never played a warlock, and I really have no desire to, I'll be honest.
I've played a warlock, but one of my friends, it is her favorite class. Out of all the classes, it's her favorite specifically because of the roleplay potential. I think warlock is kind of interesting because when you think of D&D, you have the people who really like magic. You have the people who really like the hack and slash. But then you have people who really, really like the plot and the storytelling behind it. Warlock is perfect for that because a lot of people will view, the patrons and the players, there's a relationship there where as a DM and a player, it's really cool to explore and see yes, every action has a consequence. So patrons for warlocks, typically they want something from the warlock that they've granted power to. And when you as a player are trying to decide whether or not to follow along with what your patron wants or to act against them, there's a consequence for that. Either your patron is happy and they grant you more power and you level up, or, you piss them off and they decide, bye-bye magic, no more powers. And again, great role-playing and storytelling potential, but when you're in a campaign where your players are not super into that, playing a warlock just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's a lot of, and I see it with my group, it's a lot of the warlock trying to convince the group to crash their momentum and be like, hey, I don't have magic, we need to rest. And then even the resting, it's you have to justify a 30-minute resting game, and you can't always do that right before a combat encounter because it's combat, every round 6 seconds. So it's yeah, we can't just sit here for hundreds of rounds of combat for you to recharge 2 spells.
It just doesn't make sense. Builds that I have seen, when warlock is done well, it's because they don't rely on magic. It's because they do they will use magic in the sense of their invocations and little other features that they have. They might have spells specifically from their patron, but they don't really use them unless they have to. It's kind of they'll use their spells in, press red button in case of emergency type situations, which I think is more of what they're intended for. Because again, in a whole, actions have consequences mindset, it's every time you use your patron's magic, you should be looking more into do you lean into a specific alignment? Do you have your ideals changed in any sort of way? What are the moral implications of using magic from your patron?
Yeah, I think in that regard, warlocks would make really good NPC plot hooks, but also potentially a group of players maybe being warlocks or being on board with that. The main focus is going to be on this character's backstory, which I could see some players getting behind, but yeah, mechanically, new player, and at least for the type of people that I run into, I try to push any warlock into sorcerer.
I think this might be getting a little too off topic, or maybe not, but I'm pretty sure it might be in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. They have like this little subset of rules with patrons where I think you can do a group patron.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like kind of along this idea of like oops all warlocks. Because like everybody, not every player wants to delve into somebody's specific backstory, but like when you have a group patron, the story remains centered around everybody as a group instead of just diving into one player's things and you're just an NPC in this one person's main character backstory.
Exactly.
But group patrons, very cool.
That's
Would
cool. I'll
love
check
to
that out.
explore.
I'm looking at my shelf. I have Tasha, so I'll have to check that out and look
Yeah.
into that.
Don't quote me. I feel like it's in there, but I know for sure Wizards of the Coast printed something about group patrons. So most likely in Tasha's, but definitely in a WotC book.
Gotcha. Well, last but certainly not least is Wizard.
Wizard!
I have had one player play a Wizard, and he played. I'm going to be honest. I don't know Wizards that well. I think as for newer players, Wizards very intimidating as it takes up. It's like the longest class because there's so many schools of magic you can be trained in. They have the biggest spell list. They get and I haven't dedicated enough time because again I don't have a lot of players that have played Wizard. But the player I did have, every time they cast a certain school of magic, they created a magical like shield around themselves that absorbs damage. And this player got so broken with it that he could tank hits better than our this was the play this player played where I played that paladin NPC, and this wizard could tank damage better than that than that paladin with big heavy plate armor. I do know that the one wizard class that I think is super cool, and again it's one I've always wanted to try, is the Wizard of Divination because of the portent ability, which I think is so cool, where you get to roll, I believe it's 4 dice. I could be wrong. It might only be 2, but you get to save the rolls. And then when an enemy attacks you or one of your allies does something, you can be like, oh, I saw this in the future, and they didn't roll a 2. They actually rolled this 17. Or that enemy didn't crit. He actually rolled this 2 that I rolled. I love when a mechanic can like really cause those crap moments at the table. And I think the Portent Wizard does that well. I do think they're a super complicated class because not only do they get to pick so many spells, but technically as they travel the world, they can buy spells to learn magic. They have a spell book they're supposed to keep track of. There's a lot of back end that I think a newer player would really struggle with unless they're really willing to commit to learning all those how especially like you really need to know magic if you're going to be a wizard, like spell slots and how that works.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you look at like sorcerer versus wizard, if sorcerer is like it's like the board game Candyland, wizards are like Settlers of Catan for like 18 and up. Like
Yeah.
the weight difference in terms of mechanics is vastly different. I do enjoy the fact that wizards can learn essentially any spell. It's just, again, like remembering to prepare which spells throughout the day. But wizards, there's so many different options and they are incredibly different. Think in terms of like what I've seen with players and just through like D&D within the media, I've probably seen at least 3 or 4 different types of wizards at this point, and all incredibly different. My personal favorite so far, I think it's the one you mentioned. It's the Abjuration Wizard, the one that has like the extra hit points. Like they're all about protection magic.
Yeah, that's the one.
I've seen one build of that was absolutely wild, completely broken. Abria played this wizard, and I think when she broke it down, she also included it might have been the tough and or durable feat, where like increased constitution. She had way more hit points than a typical wizard would. But yeah, like just finding ways to have an incredible wizard build that's not just specifically a glass cannon where, super strong, but also incredibly squishy, like fascinating. A non-squishy wizard is incredibly rare.
Absolutely. Yeah, kind of like what we said about cleric. I think what's cool about the wizard is you play a wizard, but you kind of can choose a school that allows you to dabble in almost any other class to some degree. Like Portent gives you divinate, like healing magic, and also the Portent ability. You can, like it's really cool, and it's one I wish I knew more about to really share. But it's a class that has only ever been played once, and it was by someone who I considered to be a DM tier player, and so I didn't need to handhold or do anything. I just trusted him to run the character, and it was a very amazing character. Like he was one of the players that got to level 20, and we really got to see what a wizard could do and get level 9 magic, and that was super cool. But I don't know if I'd trust a new player to do what he did, because there's so much back end.
I wouldn't recommend Wizard to a new player just because it's incredibly complex. It can be overwhelming, and I fear it might have the opposite effect of them falling in love with the game, because they'll just get frustrated unless they, like, I don't know. And this is to each DM's opinions. If you feel your players can handle it, by all means, try it. Don't stop them from wanting to try it just because, you think it's too complicated. Give your players some credit, but keep in mind, if you know them really well and you know that it's going to be a bit of a struggle, give them a couple options, let them make that choice for what they want to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that covers all the core classes. I know it's been a pretty long episode, which is okay. I think it's good that we covered all these. I had one question to ask you, just thinking about it as a DM to DM kind of question here, because okay, so I mentioned you got wizards, you have druids, you have clerics, which are all classes that are supposed to pray every day, and they can change their spell slots potentially multiple times per session. And then you have classes like Bard, Sorcerer, and a few of the others that they pick a set list and it only changes upon level up. I'm curious if you have a preference or if you homebrew anything, and then I'll share what I do, which I think you know what I do, but I'll share it for the audience.
I don't have a preference necessarily, and maybe this is just me having a lot of trust with the group that I play with, but whenever they do have to prepare spells, they actually prepare them. Like, they will vocalize at the start of their in-game day. They'll tell me that they are going to prepare their spells, and they'll actually choose spells for the day. When it comes to combat, if they maybe knew that they should have picked a specific spell, they will choose to follow the rules and say, well, I didn't prepare that spell today. Oops, oh well. And we just kind of follow along with the plot. Personally, for me as a player, I prefer not having to prepare my spells, just because I forget to change my spells all the time. my Artificer Sorcerer build, as an Artificer, which we did not cover in this episode, she prepares spells as an Artificer, but her Sorcerer side has set spells. I never remember to prepare my spells because I'm like, Sorcerer doesn't have to. I forget that as an Artificer, I prepare spells. So
Okay.
I don't want to have to prepare spells. My players are very good at doing it. I don't want to have to do it personally.
Okay. Well, I'm jealous because that stems into where I fall, which is the complete opposite. I have players that don't prepare their spells, and I feel like when we do finally get everybody at the table and time is very precious, I don't want to deal with that. So maybe this is a bad DM thing, and it'd be interesting to see what people think or say. But I try to have my players treat every spellcasting class as if they were sorcerers. I'm like, these are your spells, go for it. What I've done for a few players, and I kind of regret this, is I let them I bought the D&D spell cards, and I let them just kind of look through it. Worst decision I've ever made, because now all they do is cycle endlessly through their spells, I guess. But yeah, I was just curious. But we've definitely had very different players, and it would be interesting to maybe one day sit in and see that side where it's like, oh my god, they woke up and they know what spells they want. Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly fortunate that my players, they are very conscious about the spells, but keep in mind they were exposed to this game beforehand. Like, one player, actually two players, I think, got into D&D because of Dimension 20 and Critical Role. Like, there was a form of media that they were able to watch and consume, and that is how they learned to play the game before they ever tried playing themselves. Another player of mine, DM'd for her and her players. So they have a different expectation or level of expectation for the game versus a new player, like some of your players are. They came in not knowing anything about the game. They're just like, ooh, magic, gimme.
That's exactly it.
And that's entirely fair. Like I said, I'm incredibly fortunate, but even I get that not every player is going to be like that. And there's nothing wrong with your players, wanting to use their magic. I think it's just definitely you want to put them in situations where maybe magic shouldn't be the thing that they resort to.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. But I didn't mean to derail there. It popped in my head. I figured I'd ask. But yeah, so we've covered the 12. I think that's a good ending point here. Hopefully, for any new players or new DMs, that'll give you um, some ideas of either what you want to play, or maybe if you're going to try to explain these classes or things that are cool about them. Hopefully, this podcast gave you a little bit of insight on that.
Yeah. Feel free to use any of our tips or opinions if that helps at all. If you disagree with us, by all means, tell us, let us know. You can find us on social media. You can find us on Twitter or X at DM in Law. You can also find us on Instagram at DM in Law. So please let us know your thoughts on our episode. Let us know your opinions on the classes. Let us know what classes you love and hate. But yeah, until next time, thank you so, so much for listening. We cannot wait for you to check out our new episodes. We have planned for this year, so please make sure to follow us on social media. And yeah, we'll chat with you guys next time.
All right. Bye, guys.